And hello, everybody. Well, hello. Let's get those tunes turned down. How are you doing today? I hope well. I do. I really do. Welcome to the ongoing Quarantine Collective reading of Klossowski, Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle. Line by line, bit by bit. Interminably slow, as you may not know. Today we're moving on a little bit further into page, I had a 62. Is it 62? Might be 62. Yeah, 62.
I missed the second half of last week's reading. I haven't had a chance to catch up on the thought. Could you give me like the 2-minute recap?
I'll give you I'll do my best. Because the last little bit is kind of a... There's a lot that happens inside of it, but it culminates as he makes his way through, working through the way that Nietzsche is considering intensities, waves, and the flux of things. The flux of things for him, and he ends up using the same quote that is used in AO that's just fantastic, where Nietzsche is talking to the waves directly and says to them, "You and I, we are of the same origin, the same race." What he's doing in this little section is he's coming out as saying that there's no substantial psychological consistency or singularity to humanity. He's not saying that the waves are people. He's saying I, like you, are waves. He's speaking to the ocean, that the waves of, he's speaking to the ocean, the waves of the ocean, and the interference pattern of intensities and waves and flux that make up humans. This is as Klossowski sees it, Nietzsche's move away from what would become traditional psychological faculties, or at the time was the idea of the, cogito and other shit like that, some sort of substantial subjectivity that has sort of been going all the way through everything. And so the structure Klossowski's building for us is kind of the afflux and reflux. The afflux being the flux towards the gathering, versus reflux, which is a dispersion or refusal of flux. For him, these aren't opposites. It's not that one happens then the other, but instead they're complementary phases of the oscillation of the waves and interference patterns of the intensities and fluxes that make us up. Afflux has attention, will, and memory, whereas reflux has indifference, relaxation, and forgetting. It is not that they're opposites. The peak of a wave is not the opposite of the 0 point of a wave. That's not how math works. That's not how science works. That's not how modular synth music works. Instead, what we need to be considering is that our psychology, what we know of as our psychology, is actually more of a tidal wave system. That there is a continuous flux making us up. It's not a discrete singular mental state. That there are transitional phases that we go through, high and low, the high tonality, low, as Nietzsche uses this. That there is actual real energy transfer happening within this. What moves within this system isn't substance. It isn't singular, but instead intensive patterns, and energy is transferred inside of it, or eliminated or transferred, as you may say. And also that there is no underlying substrate. There's no underlying substrate that the stuff is in. It's not, it's in my brain that all this is happening. No, there isn't really a substrate for this. Waves are not the things in water. Instead, it is the very pattern of the movement of water itself that is the waves. So it's completely different sort of baseline understanding of psychology from, again, maybe not for people in this group. I know, August, you've been with us in AO and you've been doing Nietzsche readings. So maybe not as much for some of us, but it's very much an orthodox way to consider the subjectivity existing and how it's produced. I think that was okay. Yeah. The transference of flux and force and drive itself rather than essence. Yeah. And I think it's one of the things he hammers home, and again, he's going to be doing it the rest of the book, so it's not like a small thing. But it is very specific that there is no separation from this. The wave is not in a substrate. Like, I can't overstate enough how much of a absolutely important point this is. The wave is the substrate. The wave itself is the movement. There isn't actually a wave in water. The movement of water in the ocean, as it's happening at any moment, has varying levels of rise and fall, but there isn't like a wave in the ocean. We understand that as an abstraction of it, but it's just like saying there is no real time in things. That's not really how it works. We can perceive it, it's perceptual, but it exists because of the perception that we give itself, because of the interference patterns that we're sort of experiencing itself. And that's the last sort of thing that he drives at really, really hard, that the wave is the thing and that we are the wave. One sec, my mic's crackling again. One sec, guys. I always forget to reboot my fucking machine. This fixes it. I'm hoping this fixes it. There we go. I'm back. Hello, everyone. Thanks for letting me know. Crackle mic's a thing. I've given up trying to fix. If very, very smart nerds want to help me, they're free to, but we've tried. Instant robot? Is it roboting right now? Or are you just fucking with me? 92. It got better. I'm going to date myself and think that was a Monty Python reference. Yeah, so that's kind of where Nietzsche's been building up, or Klossowski's been building Nietzsche up. The previous paragraph basically sets us up in a very specific way. And that's the sort of, I guess, where we could maybe take a moment. He says in the previous paragraph, like the figures that rise to the crest of a wave, leaving behind them only foamy froth, such are the designations through which the intensity signifies itself, and this is what we call thought. The figures rising to wave crests are momentary ephemeral stabilizations of the intensive flux. They're momentarily coherent patterns. And these things immediately dissipate back into foam. But foam, which is left behind of these things, which is left behind of kind of everything that goes. The wave crashes into itself and it leaves behind a foam. Foam is indicative. Foam is the thing that seems like it sticks around. It's a residue. And this is what thought is. This is what we call thought. The designations through which the intensity signifies itself. When a wave crests, it creates foam through the mixing of water and waves and air. The waves of water sort of hit each other and do shit. When intensities of your soul reach maximum level, there's a violent mixing of the intensive flux. And the mixing is that of the creation of a signifying structure, more or less. That we're actually experiencing the creation of signification in the waves. It's not a complex process. It's one of the things that's, with Anti-Oedipus, when we do our readings, we go through early on the way that three syntheses operate and how these things go together. And it seems so complex, and people tend to think, okay, what's step 1, step 2, step 3? But that's not really what's happening. The steps are imminent to each other. These are things that are happening momentarily to each other. The way that if we were talking about the creation of foamy froth from a wave crashing, there's an area of Cyprus that I'll never forget that produces this really weird green foam. It's the tour guide said some shit about it being like Aphrodite's birthplace, but it's this really stunning, odd, foamy water area in the Mediterranean. It's beautiful. And the way that happens is because the waves are actually crashing and building, but there's no moment where like, oh, that's the moment that we actually have a bubble. The bubble sort of emerges from the interaction of these different waves hitting each other. This is what we're talking about inside of the three syntheses. All of these things are this imminent, immediate thing where it's step 1, 2, 3 happening at the same time. And here, this is, it's almost like a hyper-materialist view of how meaning is generated or how we find ourselves understanding that something exists. Because the wave that hits, that leaves that foam behind on the next wave, on the next wave, on the next wave. And over time, we understand that this is the waves hitting each other. Is it that? Is it that? Because that's not really what we're driving at. Every sign that we see is almost nostalgia for intensity that has passed us. Language is down the road. Language arrives late. Language captures the foams, the residues, the intensities, or the nostalgia for the intensities left behind. Because intensities can never really disengage itself from chaos. Signs are tethered to the intensive flux that they represent. It's a completely different way of reading all of this.
Brooks, I want to...
and it's the last line I want to kind of go on, and then we'll kind of read on. It's a lot, but it's the second half of the paragraph. But if in natures as apparently limited and closed as our own, there still exists something open enough to make Nietzsche invoke the movement of waves, it is because, notwithstanding the sign in which the fluctuation of intensity culminates, the signification, because it exists only through an afflux, can never absolutely disengage itself from the moving chasms it masks. Abysses, chasms, abyss, chaotic abyss is really the French here. And again, what's being referred to within Nietzsche, if you're an avid Nietzsche reader. The way that humans are, nature is limited and closed as our own. Humans and our finitude, bounded by skin, like I said last week, skin, skull, and individuality, right, as a thing. Apparently being the sort of big word here, we apparently are limited, apparently are closed. That's a hint towards the illusion that's taking place here. Something is open enough to make Nietzsche invoke the movement of waves. The way the self and the world exist, it is not that the self is closed off. There is a porous secondary interaction that's happening here. We are not sealed off monads, to steal from Leibniz, but instead we are wave patterns coalescing in a single spot in a much larger ocean. This is why Nietzsche identifies with waves. To him, the waves don't have a real barrier. Human skin and skull and everything is not a barrier. It is the vessel, perhaps, that's holding it, but it's not that. It's not the water is not the fucking waves. Waves are not the skin. Waves are not us. We are literally the waves. There is no substrate. So he says, the signification, like this is the, notwithstanding the sign in which fluctuation culminates, the signification, because it exists only through an afflux, can never absolutely disengage itself from the moving chasms it masks. Signification requires intensive investment, an afflux, a flux toward, afflux, in order to even exist flatly. And so it is dependent on the intensive flux, even while it conceals the intensive flux. Signs, again, traditional sort of Caesarean terminology here, sign and signifier. Signs pretend autonomy, but autonomy is illusion, and so all of it sort of withdraws this intensive investment, and signs then become dead letters. And those dead letters are kind of the big thrust for this. Signs are self-sufficient systems. The way Saussure sets up his entire setup is that language is a system of differences without positive terms. Every sign is defined purely by opposition to other signs. There's no reference to anything outside of language in any way. That's not really how Saussure works. For Klossowski, though, signs are tethered to intensive flux. They appear autonomous sort of as part of the illusion, but this appearance is dependent on forgetting, masking that origin in intensity. The autonomy of signifier is a symptom of consciousnesses necessarily falsifying themselves as part of the sort of cover-up as they exist. So they say, and it ends. Sorry, I wasn't ready to dive in. I should have gotten up earlier today, just dealt with things. Every signification remains a function of chaos, out of which meaning is generated. Chaos is not material cause. Chaos is a productive cause. Chaos doesn't create. It's productive as part of this. It's actively generating meaning as the intensities are crashing into each other, as the positive and negative forces hit each other and create crests of waves and valleys of waves in incredible, complicated sort of natures. What we have here is not cosmos of determinate beginnings. We really don't have chaos as we traditionally understand it. It's a productive cause. This is why Deleuze and Guattari have the term chaosmos, Logica Sense and Guattari's work mostly, because chaos generates order without ceasing to be chaotic. It's an important distinction versus thinking of chaos as this purely, from this, it causes these things to happen. It's not really a cause thing. Chaos is prime mover, actually is not a wildly different way to put it, because chaos is doing what it's doing. Chaos is not really here generating meaning and then becomes independent. No, meaning is ongoing dependently connected to it, meaning continuously requires chaotic investment and the investment of those things to persist. It's a functional relationship. The moment that is broken, meaning goes away. It becomes dead letters. Signs lose all meaning. Signification stops. I gave the example last week, is I had in my notes. This is thinking about the way texts work over time, right? Languages die. Words stop having the same intensities because they're not used, they're not invested in, they're not part of that same process. And as such, cultural processes become more opaque, closed in, centered on a handful of people. And signs become sort of ciphers rather than connected meaning. All of this is real central to Nietzsche, because Nietzsche's entire thing as a philologist, remember, his training was not in philosophy, but philology, the study of languages, and the attempt to revive dead signs by reconstructing contexts around them. But as Nietzsche wrote, this is actually not functional, because what you're trying to do is reanimate corpses where the intensive life has sort of fled this, as Klossowski is arguing. Yeah. So that's last week. So let's move over to the reading this week. Good Lord. It's oddly Aristotelian. Well, I mean, there's not really big on forms or essences here. I'd be up for hearing how it's more Aristotelian. Not sure I would agree fully, though. Oh, you know Aristotle better than me. Well, then I will just agree and say that would be an interesting conversation to learn sometime. I can't distinguish Aristotle 1 from 2. They're kind of all that dude who does that thing. They're all that dude. Yeah, it's a clusterfuck. Well, I've gone through enough of that where it's like early this, early that with Lacan, and I can't mentally handle it. Like Nietzsche has an early and late period. Hey, I was a Nazi. No, I'm not anymore. Now I've got like this crazy thing. Lacan is like the impenetrable version of that. Hey, I did really weird shit. Now I'm doing really weird shit. That's kind of amazing. It's a whole thing. Let's get on. This is a fast one. Wittgenstein 1, 2, and 3. There's a early to lose, later to lose. Yeah. More consistent, but it happens. There's a shorter one, and then there's a much longer one. Intensity is subject to a moving chaos without beginning or end. Thus, in each person, apparently as their own possession, there moves an intensity, its flux and reflux forming significant or insignificant fluctuations of a thought that in fact belongs to no one, with neither beginning nor end. This is a opening, establishing this stuff again, this anti-substantial, anti-substance ontology where intensity precedes or even exceeds individual consciousness or individual subjectivity. This is starting another section. As you're going to see in a second, this goes even further. Like the radical shit is going to just keep moving. So much. The phrasing, apparently as their own possession, there moves an intensity, is going to become very important, because the big deal of what we're going to be seeing is this sort of apparent possession and actual dispossession. The impersonal movement through the individual that the flux takes. This breakdown of the subject-object distinction. People don't have intensities. They are a temporary metastable intensity themselves. A set of intensities or a combination of intensities, but they're metastable. Flux and reflux language throughout this and this upcoming section, you're going to see it a lot. It's reflux, afflux, and flux. Remember, flux is variability within the thing. Afflux is change within a thing towards something. Reflux is sort of dispersion of that thing or the elimination of it. The language here is very big on trying to match Nietzsche's sort of physiological reading of thought. We went through this in chapter 2 and also the earlier parts of 3, where we talked about Nietzsche's version of digestion and how he would refer to people as dyspeptic mentally, which is an old dyspepsia. It's a fucking old term, but it's where the Pepsi the soda name comes from. The idea being sort of your indigestion internally, but mentally, that there's no difference, that these are all processes in the same way. And the way that we talk about digestion and the breakdown and then the elimination, this is, why would we not say the same thing of thought? Why would we not talk about forgetting in the same way? Why would we not talk about this physiological reading of thought themselves as wave-like oscillations and how we digest them? In the gay science throughout all of it, I know August has probably a lot to add here. And also the mental process is not separate from physical digestion. Yes, that there is no body and mind distinction in any way. This is not Nietzsche, as a video we recently watched said. This is not Nietzsche seeing the mind-body distinction and siding with the body. This is him dissolving the mind-body distinction entirely. Honest to God, I don't understand. Internet, I hate the internet so much. AI can't destroy it all soon enough. But the line that sort of sets this up, it's flux and reflux forming significant or insignificant fluctuations of thought that in fact begin to belong to no one without beginning or end. This is the way that we talk about interpretation, evaluation, but there isn't an evaluator that's stable. There is not a perspective that exists across all of this. It's not how it works. This isn't perspectivist, Brooks's perspective and how he sees things. No, there isn't really a Brooks to have a perspective. Brooks is a produced set of intensities in any given moment that's metastable. That's not a stable viewer. So how do differential intensities become meaningful without a conscious intention behind them? How does that happen? Hint, you don't know yet, and we're about to learn. But in Klossowski's going to take us through it. But that's like, how does that happen? The differential intensities become meaningful, but they don't have a steady Brooks that's trying to make them meaningful in a certain way, or a steady Brooks that's seeing them always in the same way. Because ultimately the intensities don't represent anything. They're not representative. They are the real world, ontologically real. And from that, the apparent subjects emerge as epiphenomena, more or less. That'd be how I'd phrase that. Then we get to the big one. Is everyone following me so far, for the most part? Everyone follow me so far? Produced meaning without telos. Yes, actual world, I think, is the Nietzsche. The actual world is, it's not, it's English. But yeah, that's, there's a difference for Nietzsche of like the world as we talk about it, or the actual world. Yes. The first section, intensity is subject to moving chaos without beginning or end, makes me think of Lost Highway. It makes me think of a lot of David Lynch. But yeah, it's the phrasing is pretty great. And again, as we're going to be going, the way that intensity works is it doesn't have meaning, but somehow it produces meaning. But it produces meaning without there being a stable subject. How does that happen? How is there no one this belongs to? There's no beginning, there's no end. This stable sort of chaos needs to be sort of constant and ever running. But it's not. So what in the fuck? And that's where Klossowski goes with it. So we're going to get to the next paragraph. The real world is in contrast to the fake world, traditionally appearances. Klossowski is using real here, not so much in the Plato sense, but more in the way that Deleuze and Guattari and Lacan and others are using it. That there is the real, the things as they actually are. For Lacan, this is things as they actually are things we can never directly interface with, because it is real, but we can't grasp the real, because the moment we've created some level of signification or understand ourselves as a thing, we've immediately split ourselves from it. We've created in the experience of life, the mirror stage, whatever the fuck you want to ascribe it to within Lacan. He changes that a little bit, but it's that moment that language exists, and you can see a camera, you can see Brooks, you can see a computer. You're not seeing things as they are. Instead, you're interpreting them through symbolism and through the imaginary space. But the real is the underlying stuff. Deleuze and Guattari do this too. They work differently. They don't believe the real is something that we can't deal with. Instead, the real is what we are dealing with. It is what is always being eternally produced by desire and its interactions. This is going to be much more that. This is much more that. This is the real world is produced through the intensities, and it's always immediately apparent. There is no secondary other thing. But we'll be getting to all of that. All of that. Anyone have questions, comments, anything you want me to focus on for a moment? Confusing that they use it almost opposite and different in Lacan. I don't think they do. I think they use it in identical ways. That's a whole other discussion. I think Guattari takes, and they take Lacan basically and just turn him onto himself. But that's a whole other debate. Opposite than Nietzsche? No, I don't know. I think that would be a worthwhile discussion to have. I think Lacan naturally makes things more complicated than they need to be. But his setup and his understanding of the real is very similar to Nietzsche's. As I read it. But that's a whole other discussion. Let's get to reading today.
I have to object.
But
I don't think Lacan...
contrary to this undulating element, each of us forms a closed and apparently delimited whole, it is by virtue of these traces of signifying fluctuations. That is to say, a system of signs that I will here call the code of everyday signs. As to where our own fluctuations start or stop, so that the signs can permit us to signify, to speak to ourselves and others, we know nothing, except that there is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely, the self, the I, the subject of all our propositions. It is thanks to this sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of a fluctuation, that we constitute ourselves as thinking, that a thought as such occurs to us, even though we are never quite sure if it is not others who are thinking and continue to think in us. But what is this other form? This other that forms the outside in relation to the inside we believe ourselves to be. Everything is led back to a single discourse, namely to fluctuations of intensity that correspond to the thought of everyone and no one. Do I have LJ muted? No? No? LJ's not muted. I mean, self-muted. I can't control that.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're activating and I can't hear you.
Okay, I think other people can hear me, but somehow Bruce can't hear me.
Oh, wait, why can't I hear? One second. I'm not able to hear. One moment. Why the fuck can't I hear them? What the fuck? I see them transmitting, but they mute them. LJ, try one more time.
Yes, can you hear me?
I don't understand. It's got to be something wrong with fucking Discord again. Oh yeah, that would be it. Stupid ass fucking Discord. Try again one more time, LJ. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can now. Discord, it's routing things funny for me. You shouldn't have been
No, it's okay.
so.
No, it's okay. I was just saying that I don't necessarily think that Lacan is trying to make the real more complicated than it's necessary. It might be a little bit too much into the symptomata from the really old mathematics and science symptomata. But it's still, it has to do with how you said representation or some sort of direct handling means that there will be another part of the thing that's evading the perceptions and senses. I think it's as simple as that. I don't think Lacan's trying to do some fancy stuff. In a clinical perspective, it might look like that way, but eventually go back to the simplicity. I think that's why it actually can sustain a lot of the discourse in the clinical settings. But yeah, that was just for me. It's very coherent with these overthinkers.
Well, so a big difference would be for Klossowski and for Deleuze and Guattari, the symbolic and these other things, the way we understand representation is also the real.
Sorry, say that again?
Representation, like we're talking to people, the way representational thought operates. I'm talking to someone, they're talking about symbols of things and abstractions. It's also real. That's the real. It's also the real. The real is everything that is eternally, constantly produced.
Okay.
So it's not wildly far, but it is different.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll pay more attention. Thank you.
Oh no, it's an interesting separation. And again, we'll do that another time. Anytime I bring Lacan in, I knew these discussions always happen because it's so fascinating to everyone who's read this stuff, and me too. And it's a hard rabbit hole not to go down because it's really fun and it's interesting. But I'm going to try not to today. I'm going to do my best not to today. But if contrary to this undulating element, each of us forms a closed and apparently delimited whole, it is by virtue of these traces of signifying fluctuations, that is to say, a system of signs that I will here call the code of everyday signs. Code of everyday signs is going to become a term you're going to hear Klossowski talking a lot. And it's an important one. He used it earlier when we were talking about the way that fluxes hit each other, and then they become self-referential, and then they produce the code of everyday signs. For Klossowski, this is his term for the institutional language thing that happens. The institutional language that through its use produces a surface effect of a stable identity. This is not the representation of pre-existing entities. The signs of everyday, the code of everyday signs, is constitutive to the operation of the flux. So the process of semiotics we're seeing here produces the subject effect. It is not expressing a prior interiority. Incredibly important here. Incredibly important here. This is very much emergent through the process of these things. And the code of everyday signs is the apparatus of language that produces the effect of stable identity. So in this opening bit here, what Klossowski is doing is, again, bringing up an important paradox that sort of is happening as we're reading through this. Individuation, in the Simondonian sense, emerges not despite flux, but actually within and through flux itself. The undulating element he's talking about here is the wave mechanics, the flux reflux that forms significant blah, blah, blah from the previous paragraph. And I don't know, so much of this book, it's the intensive fluctuations. It's the ontological substrate of waves that is throughout this entire book. This is the phrasing, the undulating element. But the big deal is that the closure of this happens instead of being through stable essences, which tends to be, we'll say, the opposition's move or the other side of things or the traditional philosophical analytical way of talking. It's actually through traces, recordings, minor recordings. This is early process philosophy and the rejection of substance as a foundational thing. Right? I know it's a lot in this sentence, but it's Klossowski. And so what Klossowski's doing here is he's kind of putting space between what we would talk as the sort of two ways people commonly talk about sign systems. We talk about I don't want to say Derridian, but I would probably lean that way. Chomsky for sure. Because again, this is philology, this is linguistics, this is that thing. When people talk about institutional codes that organize consciousness, which they do, we talk about that. It's a really weird phenomenon, but it's a thing we can kind of recognize. We start to see that the way we talk, the words we use, seem to create this stabilized subject. But there's also this impulsive system of the depths, which is a phrase I'm just going to be using as we do this, that doesn't really communicate with consciousness directly. And so with that, the everyday signs, that's why the codes of everyday signs. Everyday signs are the first part, the institutional codes that organize consciousness, and the codes of that are the impulsive depth systems. These things, he's in this sentence, he's marrying them and showing how that they actually come together. It's a really, really subtle usage of Nietzsche, August. Yeah, it's and also I mean it's fucking brilliant. Everyday signs are institutional codes that organize consciousness. So when I talk, literally right there, when I talk, there you go. It's organizing your understanding of me and yourself and all of that, where it's parceling out experience as a thing, right? They're tools of the gregarious, the herd space, the fixation that stabilizes this intensive multiplicity into recognizable elements, personas, and things at large. It's why we have names for each other. It's why we talk. It's why it's how we work socially. The herd mentality for the whole thing. It's roboting again. I'm so sick of this shit. Is it roboting on YouTube? YouTube didn't yell at me. They usually yell at me. Usually all bunch of dicks there. Well, it's a little bit. I'll just keep going for now. If it gets really bad, do let me know. YouTube, I look at you. I'm disappointed. People in Discord are calling it up before you. It's just very, very, very disappointing. As to where our own fluctuations start or stop so that the signs can permit us to signify, to speak to ourselves and others, we know nothing. It's such a tight, simple sentence. I'm trying to figure out how to dive into it because it is using jargon. The parenthetical here, so that signs can permit us to signify, to speak to ourselves and others. That's going to be the thing. Signs don't represent pre-existing boundaries, but they are functions that create provisional stopping points or stabilizations in this continuous flux. Every word, every sign is a momentary stabilization. It is not an eternal thing underneath it. It's not revealing anything that was there. It is a momentary stabilization being spoken of and actualized as we go through it. when we say, and when he writes here, signify, to speak to ourselves and others, this is basically destroying the way we tend to think of the internal and external. That's not it, because both are the same semiotic apparatus. It's just operant through this gregarious coding mechanism. There's no inner outer, or this is my consciousness versus yours, any of that shit. If you're introspecting your existence, if you are taking a moment to analyze within yourself and you're not talking to anyone, it's as much of an institutional operation as talking here in this group. There's no inner life. There's no inner life. Yeah, there's no inner life. There are no, and that's the line. It's spoken in a really weird way. That's how I read what Klossowski's doing here. As to when our own fluctuations start or stop, we know nothing, because it's him saying that we know nothing. That's not a thing. We don't see it as a thing. This is not the setup. That this is an ontological claim. There are no determinate boundaries in the individuated fluctuation patterns that exist. That's created through the same process. There isn't an actual boundary of inner or outer experience. Just what I'm able to denote and then create through the institutional use of the herd and gregarious mechanisms of language. Oh my God, my head's hurting. Can fluctuation in intensity be understood via what happens when looking at a lifelike painting? I mean, also just sitting there. Everything you do and everything you experience is fluctuation in intensity. We'll get to the high and low points of it, which can speak to the sort of epiphanies or enlightened moments or depressive moments, whatever it is. But there's nothing that isn't this. There's nothing that isn't this. And it is kind of Baudrillardian. Are you ready for simulacra? I hope you're ready for simulacra, because we're going to be getting to Klossowski's use of the term, which is very different. Very different. So he goes on. We know nothing, except that there is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely the self, the I, the subject of all our propositions. This is the I sign, the ich sign, for Nietzsche, the intensity marker. This is not substance. This is not the traditional cogito. I isn't naming a thinking thing, or, oh, there's that part of me that thinks. I think, therefore I am. Ah ha ha. No. I marks peaks or troughs or whatever it may be that is that as affective intensity. Right? So the phrasing, he says, it's always corresponding to, This is when we use it. It's produced in those moments. Again, that fixity of the way that the words are the momentary metastabilization as these things are happening and as the intensities are going through, as we're experiencing them right now. Right now, the intensities are colliding, and I'm using the words, and you're hearing, and you're doing those things, and you're taking it in. It's always this moment to these intensity extremes. It's a way of capturing and coding excess, unmanageable affect. I would say excess. It's important because this is not normal traditional semiotics. This is Nietzsche's like gay science grammatical critique. The logical grammatical necessity of subjects for predicates in language. Remember, Nietzsche's a philologist. He's a philologist, not a philosopher. The use of predicates and the need of an I for such a thing creates this illusion in language of substantial selfhood. And even the phenomenological sense of being a local locus of experience is produced by these sign operations itself. It isn't just, as Nietzsche wrote about in Gay Science, that as we talk, we create the stability of our own selfhood. But for Klossowski, it's more radical. The locus of experience, the sense of such a thing, is actually produced in sign operations and how they interact. And he goes on. It is thanks to this sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace, a fluctuation, that we constitute ourselves as thinking, that a thought as such occurs to us. Consciousness is fascinating and paradoxical sort of on itself. Selfhood, the existence of yourself as you perceive it, is produced by treating intensity traces as if they were substantial, of substance. Substantial has very particular usage here. Substance in the Spinozist substance sense, like the philosophical sense. But this production is actually creating the phenomenon of being as thinker. We constitute ourselves is a reflexive concept. There is no pre-existing agent to perform constitution here. The constitution produces its own agency retroactively. He has a phrase in here, the always variable trace of a fluctuation. If you're reading AO or if you've read AO, this is recordings in the BWO, by the way. Totally just that. It's just totally that. The traces, the little bits that are left over in time, the things that happen in these ways. This is the phrasing. The instability is inherent. It's inherent. Even when the marker of identity is used, this I is actually registering different intensive values at any moment. The constancy is actually a function of marking extremes. It is not a function of substantial content. When I say, hi, I'm Brooks, there is a function of marking extremes in my own experience, but also as you hear it, same thing. It's marking, oh, that's Brooks. There's no substantial like Brooksness to the thing. It is the function of marking extremes that takes place. But that Brooksness, or the thing I'm saying, I am Brooks, the thing that's happening is a moment-to-moment variability. It's never identical. That's not really the thing. It's not the same stuff carrying through. It's not the same stuff carrying through. And so, thanks to this sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of fluctuation, thanks to that sign, without semiotic apparatuses that exist, without any of these things, without this institutional knowledge of language and the use of language, consciousness wouldn't be a thing. There's no pre-semiotic thought or pre-linguistic selfhood that exists meaningfully. This is similar. I've had discussions with people about Hegel, like Hegel's mediation. This is probably closer to that than what a lot of people would consider. But it's there. It doesn't have the Alphabung, the dialectical shit within it. This is not that. Signs are not sublating themselves. They don't preserve what they code. They're momentary, ephemeral productions that leave a trace and move on. To be Brooks is to go Brooksing. Yes, and a tree greens. Trees aren't green. trees green. It's all about language. It's really important. It's really important. And he goes on. Even though, so he says, just to read the whole thing, it is thanks to this sign, I, the ich sign, the I sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of fluctuation, that we constitute ourselves as thinking, that a thought as such occurs to us, even though we are never quite sure if it is not others who are thinking and continue to think in us. It's so good. What's green? Well, that's kind of the point. My joke is it is a Cezanne Deleuze reference. Yes, Brett Kennedy's. When we talk about, it's a logic of sense. When we talk about seeing, wow, that tree's really green right now. What the fuck does that even mean? It's what we're actually saying is that the tree is really greening. But because we use the singular possessive, it changes it to the tree being green. But a tree is only green for that moment or that season or that part, and a tree isn't green. It's ephemerally transitive, naturally. This is kind of in a lot of stuff. Apples, apple. The apple, apples. Brookses. The computer, computers. Things do their thing. They're actually primarily a process, but we turn them into a singular noun to give ourselves a temporality that we can understand and we can communicate, which is great. Like it's again, communication is kind of a minor miracle if you spend any amount of time on it. It's more or less telepathy with sounds that I make with my mouth, that you're able to grasp any of this, or that we can etch words. It's insane that we can have this level of complexity be able to be communicated. It's amazing, but it requires a normative, central sort of apparatus of language. That apparatus of language can take on a little bit of a life of its own, you might say. And that's a little bit what we're going into. Super, super big in Chapter 3 of Anti-Oedipus, by the way. Also Logic of Sense, also just so many other fucking good books. But, to continue. Communication communicates. It's not bad. I guess it's a woody woo. That's not bad. That's not bad. But the line here, even though we are never quite sure if it is not others who are thinking and continue to think in us. Who owns thoughts? Like this is Nietzsche, by the way. This is just genealogy of morals. Like, this is just genealogy of morals, I want to say. Like, gay science, of course. This is just a lot of Nietzsche. This is a lot of Nietzsche. This is not, like, paranoid speculation, but talking about, like, the structural way that words are used. And once you abandon a substantial selfhood as a thing, who owns thoughts? If the I sign, the ich sign, is an intensity marker in this weird ocean of semiotic codes, then the boundary between my thought, self-thought, and your thought, other thought, is kind of not there. It doesn't really exist in the same way. There's a question of like, hey, you have thoughts, those thoughts basically come words, and then I take them and I run with them. Well, how does that work? If thoughts aren't owned by a person, by a subject, by a single unique substance who's claiming them, then I would ask, is there a perchance way that this repetition, this return, this circle also doesn't have the same subject, but instead intensive configurations that recur across different sign systems eternally? Maybe I'm giving a little bit of a spoiler. But what is this other form? This other? God damn it, I keep misreading it. I'm going to reread it. But what is this other that forms the outside in relation to this inside we believe ourselves to be? That, again, like Deleuze, like all these, that's why I love these guys. Klossowski's not throwing out and saying there is no other. Of course there is. We experience it as it. Come on. You fucking absolutely experience others. You are other people. Well, maybe you're not. Maybe you're all bots and it's a big fucking trick. But I've heard a few of your voices. I've even met LJ and August in real life. And we've broken bread. So they exist. So wait, other people do exist. So we're not throwing that out. That's not the idea. That's not what they want to do. It's not what Klossowski wants to do. It's, again, how we come to understand these things is because, the binary of self and other is a product of sign coding. Same thing. The inside we believe ourselves to be is actually already a belief effect. It's not a phenomenological given that there is a Brooks, there is someone else. So when we talk about sort of traditional phenomenological structure, we tend to start from the first person. If you read Ponti or, I like phenomenology, to be fair, but like when you start with them, they always start from first person givenness, I think is the phrase that I've run into a bunch. And then that process accounts for others. But Klossowski is like, no, inside and outside actually emerge simultaneously. They emerge simultaneously from the operations of this semiotic structure. The other is indefinite. It's not the other. This is not a determinate singular person. It is, but what is this other? This other. It's not another subject, but it's instead a limit function that produces other subject effects. Inside outside, as a thing, is perspectival and an effect itself. It's all a single field of intensive flux. And that's how this ends. Everything is led back to a single discourse, namely to fluctuations of intensity that correspond to the thought of everyone and no one. Of everyone and no one. The single discourse is not a unified logos, you might say, but it's an ontological field that's univocal. Everything reduced to intensive variations. The phrase here, the single discourse, is the process of sign production and interpretation. Discourse. This is not linguistic expression. This is discourse. Process of sign production and interpretation that happens. So, everything is led back to that, namely to fluctuations of intensity that correspond to the thought of everyone and no one. Fluctuations of intensity is the ontological primitive. That is the thing that is there. This is materialism through Nietzsche, Klossowski, Deleuze, Guattari. It's not atoms. It's not quarks or quanta, any of that. It's not substances. Instead, affects and forces are the fundamentality of things. Spinoza, Deleuze fucks with this, but Spinoza's like monism, which is a single substance with infinite attributes, kind of gets shifted here. This is where Deleuze takes it. It's where Nietzsche, I think, takes it as well. It's Nietzsche's will to power without monism. It's the idea of the force, the movement, the thing that's happening there. So with that, because of that, again, the herd communication we were talking about earlier, the gregarious communication systems, the thoughts of everyone and no one. Thoughts are not owned by any subject who speaks them, because, I mean, each subject is themselves an effect of this thought process. You don't own the idea of yourself any more than you own the ideas you've said. It's not an idea or a thought that's yours. You are also yours in that sense. Doesn't make sense. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. That doesn't work when you break it down. What do they belong to? You. But you are also an effect of that very same process that's also ephemeral and also went away as I started talking again. But if I remind you, you exist, now you exist again. Oh, that's who owns. No, that this is not what's going on here. That everyone, the thought of everyone, is this transpersonal circulation. This is a phrase that they use in AO. It doesn't mean trans people. It's not the setup. Trans means across all. So like the transpersonal circulation of thoughts, the transpersonal, not suprapersonal, and it's all of that. And it's done through this institutional code of everyday signs that he's referring to. Everyone captures this circulation of thoughts through these codes. No one is about more or less the absence of that subject at the beginning. God damn it. 1 second. Well, LJ's not hearing it. No one on YouTube's yelling at me, so that'll be that. August is sensitive to it because as someone who runs a reading group, it is very frustrating when these things go badly. So I appreciate it. But before we move into the next paragraph, we'll do like questions or comments or anything like that. But the things to drive from sort of the beginning of this reading to now. The layout here is actually very specific, and we can sort of talk about each of the layers of what's happening here. First is that individuation emerges from flux through semiotic coding. This is not despite the flux. The flux is itself like the creation of that semiotic coding. So the flux is the thing. The semiotic coding is everything clashing into itself, all of the flux in boosh, doosh, doosh, and the in time being left, and the semiotic code that's left over, we attach meaning to in time, and again, over and over and over. I do this. I being a marker of particular intensities, not of substances. And as such, thoughts, ideas, epiphanies, whatever it is, aren't really owned by a subject. There really isn't a subject, because subjects themselves are also effects of that very process of what produces thought. With this, the inside-outside binary collapses into a single field of intensive variation socially. So it's a total shift in, I think, a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of shit in there. But that's the basics of where we're at right now. I'll listen to this stream later and figure out if I can figure it out. I've been trying. I've just seriously given up. It's very frustrating. But does anyone have a question, comment, anything here? Would adore to hear what that might be. Please. Hello. All right, fair enough. Won't force it. I really like this book.
Yeah, it's great. Honestly, not much to add.
Yeah, it's there's a beauty in a lot of this that is just kind of wild, to be frank.
Klossowski's an exceptionally clear writer. I've been really impressed by that aspect of it.
It's wild. And again, so in the French, it's very, very good. This is effectively a really phenomenal translation. I have to just gush over Smith's work on this, because You could fuck this up. You could easily fuck up this translation. Klossowski's stunning when it comes to writing, but the way it's been brought over to English is just amazing. And there are very few philosophy books that are this level of complexity and oddness, that are dealing with something that is very near that wooey bullshit critical theory side of things I fucking hate, where people are like, oh no, it's hermeneutics and witchcraft and sorcery and tarot cards. It's like, okay, cool. This is, that's not for me. But he's also not going the other direction where you end up in sort of I don't know, Nazis. I just pass. Instead, it's right down the lines of just pure process philosophy, and it's so simple. And the way he states things is so almost poetic. It's just incredible. And when I say poetic, I don't mean analogy or metamorphosis. I need to find that Adorno line that I keep using, where he says that a person will write a book, a writer will write a chapter, a great writer will write a paragraph, but a poet will write a sentence. And more meaning that, someone who really understands language and how to do this can carry the same amount of meaning. And I think Klossowski just shows that exceptionally well. Just exceptionally well. One sec.
I am curious, actually, to dig into how intensity is designed or defined a little bit more, because I kind of get what is intended by it, but it seems like it's maybe intentionally left rather open and not like tied to something that's more like materially empirical, partly to avoid a problem of like making false assumptions about how the material works.
Well, so there's kind of a built-in response to that, which is that intensities themselves resist conceptual capture by their nature. A definition of it that uses conceptual apparatuses, like if I were to describe it out, but intensities precede this. So it's the same way like when Deleuze and Guattari in Anti-Oedipus are trying to define desiring machines, or desire, or libido, and the force there and the flux there. They work through examples of how it works down the road and the emergent properties of it, but defining it itself kind of it is a thing that naturally sort of exists in a defiance of that, because it's preconceptual. You can't define something that's preconceptual using concepts downstream of its own existence without sort of fucking the thing up, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, I did feel the connection to Sunyata in like exactly that capacity. But the thing that I think is interesting about Sunyata is that they're explicitly avoiding making statements about its nature, like pratitya samutpada. What is that sound?
LJ, lots is coming through your mic. You're gonna have to mute up.
Sorry, did not know I was on mute. Sorry.
No worries. But pratitya samutpada is mentioned as like an attribute that it has, but it's still like it's very cautious. Whereas here, there's a lot that's being said about what intensities are and what they do, which strikes me as a bit different in some ways. In that Sunyata is more of like, I feel like it's an approach from like an immanent critique from the transcendental side or the ideal side, saying that it cannot fully encapsulate what this thing is. Whereas here it seems like we are kind of coming from the ontological side a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Very much. Yeah, it's like if I were to try to put language to it, I would talk about the affective experience and visceral impact of things that happens prior to how you make meaning or understand them. If you've ever been in a truly terrifying situation or a truly joyous situation where meaning escapes you. Like you're not really recognizing what's happening, but it's either joyous or sad or terrifying in almost I don't want to say pure way, but in a pre-conscious way, that like the thing that happens before you say to yourself, I am afraid. There's that feeling, the bodily surge of terror, anger that comes with it a bit. That before you conceptualize an object, before you say, I am tired, there's the rush of all of those intensities that come in. The intensive states are that thing that we come to recognize. They're the affective magnitudes that aren't about anything.
That makes sense. So, in a manner of speaking, it's well, I know that they're trying to some degree to defy a purely phenomenological reading, right? But there
Yes.
is sort of like I've noticed when people approach ontology, they'll do it from different directions, right? And I feel like sometimes when people, one person is presenting an ideal ontology and another is presenting a material ontology, they're not actually always in disagreement, right? I think you actually kind of allude to that in your Whitehead video a little bit when you mentioned that he's kind of a materialist in a way.
I read him as one.
Yeah, and that would make a lot of sense to me too. I feel that perhaps what they're doing here is they're kind of defining a substrate for a not quite material or ideal ontology, that rather than it being a substrate in the sense of like a thing upon which other things occur, it is just the thing itself as it occurs.
Well, the ways I've always, and I've early on in the AO readings, this is one of the more complex things when you start talking about sort of intensities, quantities, qualities, and intensive versus extensive and all of this shit. It's one of the things I fucked up very early on. And it took me a lot of time to sort of, I don't know, find the right people to explain it to me. Because a lot of people made comments that were just dickish, and I just responded in kind. But what we're talking about here is very much magnitudes that are not extensive. So when we talk about extensive magnitudes, things that are measurable and divisive, when we talk about that, we tend to mean things like something is 100 meters long. It's an extensive, measurable magnitude. But an intensive magnitude quantity is temperature. And this is the one we commonly talk about sort of inside of this. If I were to say that 50 degrees C, it's not really halfway between 0 and 100. It's not halfway between boiling and freezing. Not really. Not in the same way that, for example, if I had a 100-meter rope and I cut it exactly in half, I'd have two 50-meter ropes. But if I cut, 100 degrees in half, I don't end up with two 50-degree temperatures. Like, that's not how it works. It's intensive magnitudes. And this intensive quantity is the big deal. This is, as Nietzsche talks about, like what appears as qualitative differences, colors and emotions and thoughts. This is actually quantitative, intensive differences. Consciousness is one intensity degree. Unconsciousness is another. They're not the same kind divided into pieces. They're magnitudes that are themselves intensive. A high intensity peak would be the self. Low intensity peak would be the dissolution of the ego, perhaps. So as such, with this, there's not really a kinds of being that are absolutely different. It's only really degree differences that become apparent as kind differences. And this is like, it's one of the harder things for me. Maybe other people are smarter than me, which is generally true. But it's like, this is taking me a long time to grasp, because this is Coeur de Deleuze, this is a setup, but this is Nietzsche. Nietzsche's where all this comes from. Different perspectives are different configurations of intensity. They're not different views of the same reality.
I think that's making some sense to me, because it's like, well, now it just suddenly slipped, but let me see if we can grab it again. So I was reading a little bit of the introductory sections in difference and repetition, and
Mhm.
he mentions that there are no generalities, or rather that we identify generalities, not that there are ontologically generalities. And
Right.
so perhaps, in a sense, what they mean here is that uh, um, uh, there is not like a there's not a fundamental axis upon which we can measure the magnitude of the thing, but rather one can aggregate similarities between things in sort of a molar sense, and that can give more of a sense of magnitude, as opposed to how we can supposedly more objectively measure the extensive. But I would personally, I have to admit, I think I kind of am skeptical of this duality of the extensive versus the intensive, because I think the extensive is also just emergent from the intensive, and I think that
Oh, it is.
um, we give too much reification to temporal and spatial axes. I don't
Oh
know that
no,
there's
no,
really
no, no. You're spot on. And this is again, this is the the point I'm trying to get at is less that there is that intensive quantity versus extensive quantities, and that's a duality that we need to have. No, it's more we tend to think of things as extensive quantities. We tend to talk about them as measurable and divisible when they're within a kind. Like right, like half of a rope, half of that jar of peanut butter, half of this cup of tea. We tend to think of things as measurable and divisible, and that's like, if we do that, puts substance at the base. Like that's if that's the setup, that's toss that out. Like we can talk about those. It's an abstraction. There really isn't half of a rope also to cut. Instead, its intensities are themselves the magnitudes that exist. They're the degrees of force that cannot be divided without changing fundamentally how they operate.
That makes good sense. Yeah, yeah. So it's like so extensive, or that which can be plotted on a continuous axis, is an emergent property that shows up when something exists in a continuous space. It's not necessarily something that's fundamental. That makes good sense. Yeah.
I hope so. It's you're talking about, like, this is not the easy stuff. Yeah.
I suppose the reason why I found that kind of interesting is because I've been uh, I've been looking into mathematics, particularly after I was kind of got sucked into quantum mechanics, which happens to like everybody at some point, right?
Mhm.
But I was learning about the Hilbert spaces and like Fourier transforms, and I learned, especially with like, this is going to get a little bit jargony, but I'll pull it back. Shannon,
Literally, of all the places in the world, you don't ever have to say this is about to get jargony. It's the QC. Like,
uh,
ever.
uh, this guy Shannon, which if you've heard of like Shannon Surprise or that sort of thing, it's he figured out essentially how much minimum noise you can get, which is very like related to things like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, or the like focal length to depth, or rather shutter speed versus what is that thing called, aperture size of like, I'm getting off topic, but anyways, when you put all this together, you can find that when you try to Fourier transform something, there isn't just a single basis upon which it can be transformed, but rather you get a distribution of different bases that you can transform onto, with a whole variety of different possible spectra that can show up within it, right? And
Mhm.
so the thing I find interesting about this is that it's related to that in that it's fundamentally declining to agree that like there is a extensive basis that is found or fundamental, but rather that we choose our bases and we decide how to define things like temperature based off of that. But that the fundamental reality is without basis.
Well, so the the thing for me that's important, because again, instead of getting into the dichotomy of the intensive extensive thing, which isn't their point. Again, I've made this mistake. This is a fine mistake to make. It's just it's one I've made. This is just that stuff. Static return. One moment. is. All right. All right. Good. I haven't rebooted my computer in like 2 weeks. It's fine. This is my fault. But it is what it is. And I want to make sure I get the whole point in there without static being added. The point here is less a dualism. That's a traditional way of talking about this, and people have come at this. I've come at this. But that's not the thing. Instead, the fundamental is intensive. From the intensive, emergently, we find the extensive. Like Deleuze talks about this in Difference and Repetition. This is like chapter 5, shortened down part of it, at least. That the extensive is explicated intensivities. It's not a separate thing. The intensivities, the intensive structure of things produces and explicates into the extensive. Bergson, for example, duration for him, durée comes first, and from this we get spatialized time as an abstraction that emerges from it. This is like baseline stuff. Intensive is the ontologically prior thing. The product of intensive operations is extensive magnitudes. To say another way, intensive depends on nothing. Extensive depends on the intensive. The intensive can exist just fine without the extensive. It's pure flux. It's doing its thing. Great. But the extensive requires stabilized measurements that presuppose underlying forces. It requires it. And this is I think the fundamentally good way to talk about this, like the best way is in What is Philosophy, where Deleuze goes into how science operates, that it exists by basically creating singular functions that can be measured and destroying everything else, that it's literally about defining and creating elements that can be measured in a way that it's only measuring that thing as much as possible.
That makes sense, but then it would raise the question of what is the source of the structural closeness between intensities, such that some of them are aligned and some of them are disaligned, or rather, some of them create constructive interference and others destructively interfere, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, it's again, I would hesitate to say that it's that there are different intensities. Like again. The creation of those kinds, the separation of them out necessitates that there are variabilities in the intensive. And those variabilities are interpreted as such. Their variabilities create the breaks, they create the foam, the signs where we denote we denote foam or code, and we have code and moments that give separation and breakage, which then we build into larger meaning.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose the what I'm sort of getting at with that question is why is it structured? Like, if the intensities can certainly be all fundamentally different in some qualitative capacity, such that there's no like direct perfect similarity between them. And of course, this is like an ontological thing that we can't necessarily speak on.
Pull back from that first. Just that first thing. The thing that's happening is, in order for the intensity to experience itself, it has to break from itself. So it becomes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so as such, it's because the thing can't refer to itself or see itself or whatever. So it immediately breaks and then reemerges. So what we have is this really weird, the ontological real, right, that is pre-reflective of affects, is the intensities of differential magnitudes of force. This constitutes that, right? These circulate impersonally through bodies, and the process of the self-referential as it's happening, as the foam is being generated, as it's seeing itself, the meaning that's created is a surface effect of institutional coding operations inside of this.
Yeah. That part makes sense. I suppose to go back to the intensities, though, are these discrete or continuous or something different, or
they're let's say I showed you an oscilloscope, and it was a 3D oscilloscope that covered all the energy readings or vibrations or whatever the fuck you want to say, it doesn't even matter, over a huge area, would you say it's a flux, multiple fluxes? How would you refer to it? Well, it is a flux, like as a whole. But as we start seeing difference between them, as difference emerges, and we find the differential that is created between the different hills and the different valleys, as this is denoted, and we have the foam that is built off of that, these things begin to emerge as separate themselves, but they exist prior to that. They wholly exist prior to that.
I see. So this is more like a divided or bifurcated, I guess would probably be an even better word, like total phase space. The pre-individuated idea there makes good sense to me.
You could talk about it the same way, like this is Spinoza's substance, more or less, but put into force and movement. That's how Deleuze talks about it. That's literally how Deleuze talks about this. That it's not that there is one single substance, but instead he reads Spinoza and he makes its move through the will to power. He brings them together. He's like, oh, there is one substance, there is the chaos of everything that is basically pre-personal, pre-subject, pre-known, pre-meaning as a thing. And it stabilizes momentarily in these metastable sort of entities that we can sort of name, or that emerge against each other. And as they emerge against each other, out come different things. And the different things, again, are themselves directly produced through this process. I would say you can read it through Spinoza. Other people might yell at me. I don't know.
I will have to get to Spinoza at some point. I've heard it's very important.
Yeah, it's I'd probably say that as like a last note, because it's really a super fun it's a really just really fascinating. But if we're talking about intensive and extensive in this way, does that enable insights and ways of understanding things that are simply impossible if we do subject-object dualism, mind-body dualism, or if we put extensive as the base? And I would say abso-fucking-lutely in every single way. And so even if we can find limitations, which I do think, I'm trying not to get too much ahead. Klossowski answers a great deal of what you're talking about in time, and there's a handful of other thinkers who've done that as well. I can't bring it to mind right now because this is, again, something I've been dealing with and tearing with myself. But to me, the distinction itself remains valuable simply because it can enable insights that simply don't work otherwise, that give us a better understanding of things, that are more productive in general. Even if we can't like say, oh, it's this, I would come to argue that that's actually the opposite of what Klossowski would say. But even if we're doing that, it still provides us an ontological understanding that we can do so much more with than otherwise.
That makes sense. I suppose to how to frame it. The thing that I find interesting is that he's using the singular form when talking about the intensity, and I gather that is definitely intentional as not like a statement about its ontological nature, but rather about how we perceive it. And so if we look at it that way, especially with the pre-individuated idea, this reminds me a bit of what I've read from secondary texts. I have yet to get to Thousand Plateaus, but of what is meant by singularity in Deleuze's terminology, that these are motions in the phase space where something goes from one like system of attractor basins or things that are likely to occur to a system passing through, rather, and then it is sort of like bifurcated in a sense. And so we could think of an intensity as being like that, like a thing that can be considered to be individuated in some capacity.
So I would add it's a minor one, but as I read Deleuze, intensities are not singularities. These are not analogous to each other. Instead, a singularity is an intensive event. Klossowski's very heavy into talking about fluxion and waves. Deleuze is much more, I'll say this a million times, he's much more a philosopher of math and logic than people think. They're describing fundamentally the same thing, but they do it from varying angles. So it's not so much that Deleuze has singularities that are replacing and dealing with what Klossowski's doing exactly. It's not really an addition. It's a formalization of the very specific event moment.
That makes sense. Yeah,
it's very much the point, like the point in calculus. Like that's the thing he's doing. It's the point in calculus. And a flux isn't a point in calculus. A flux would be the wave sign, for example. It would be like the entire thing, and the point would be the singularity. That's the connection I'd probably encourage.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to tie them together in the sense that an intensity can become discrete in the manner in which Klossowski is speaking of them by interacting with a singularity, if that makes sense. And that's why we can refer to
singularities are intensities at critical evental thresholds where accumulation triggers a qualitative change in them, a fundamental change. Which is kind of a lot. But this is why, again, calculus is crazy. Read the Fold. Just read the Fold. This is the Fold, who Daniel Smith also did a better version of, which I think if you search Dan Smith, we have like 1,000 times in here, because I don't think he can get it published, sadly. But it's fucking amazing, and it is 100% the thing you're talking about right now, and it's based on Leibniz, and it's very, 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 very calculus.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I'll grab that one from the library.
And it's like 80 pages. It's like the smallest Deleuze book. It might be the smallest Deleuze book. It's like a pamphlet if you compare it to his other shit.
We probably want to do a reading group of the Fold someday.
We've debated that we will at some point. I know Ben has been itching at that, but we've talked about it. The Fold is such a complicated thing to talk about and go through, that it's a different type of reading group. Like it would be a working group rather than a reading group.
I'm down for that.
Yeah, Leibniz and the Baroque, the Fold. And Dan Smith's translation, do not buy the fucking book. One sec, I'll just repost it again. One sec. There, the Smith translation. I bitch about all of the translations of Deleuze. Nothing compares to how bad the Fold's translation is. It's not even a thing. Low-hanging fruit says, it's fair. In mathematics, a singularity is a point at which a given mathematical object is not defined. A point where the mathematical object ceases to be well-behaved in some particular way, such as by lacking differentiability or analyticity. Analyticity. Fucking I hate that word. So if you have a curve, and I have a point on a curve, if I only have the point, I don't have a curve, obviously. But the point of the, how math works, this sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, because this feels like I'm remedial. Hey, I'm going to give you a thing to plot. Okay, here as it is. Okay, cool. And now you're plotting this point and all the points along. But the functions are where the curve changes. That's why we have the functions where they are. Otherwise, it would be a different fucking wave. It would be a different fucking everything. It would be a different plotting line on that graph. That's the whole point, is that the points The singularities are really in themselves meaningless. But when you have a couple of them, suddenly you have a entire function of all of these things. But the points are always the place where something shifts, something changes. That's what's like how it works. It's as you go down, the line keeps going until it doesn't. God, calc sucks, but it's an important distinction. It's an important distinction. It's the critical points that organize the waves of intensity. These are singularities for Deleuze in Logic of Sense and in his other works. They're not separate from the field. They're features of the field. They're places where the field intensifies or rarefies. Those are the two words he uses for it, at critical degrees that shift things around. Like that's the features. That's where the thing turns left. That's not really how math works, but I'm just using there you go. When we talk about peaks of intensity or troughs or foam, these are singularities. This is the singularities. These are the points of maximum or minimum or alternating or shifting intensities that organize things into patterns. What translation would you recommend for difference and repetition? The main translation is actually quite good. It's not perfect, but it's. I haven't had a lot of issues with it. There are a few moments that are really nitpicky, but Eldoran, who you can at any time on the server. I give you permission to at Eldoran anytime. That's like Eldoran's gem is that book. And sadly, they have a real life and a studying of school and learning and growing as a person. So they haven't been doing difference in repetition reading group recently. They do Fridays now for Spinoza. I know they were gonna. Were they gonna do like 6 hours of reading on Sunday at one point, and then
they wanted to do Kant after Spinoza on Saturdays, and they would be up till like 3 a.m. to do this.
I think
this, of course, did not happen.
I mean, here's the thing, and I say this with all love to Eldoran. Eldoran's the only person I would know who'd go, "Hey, let me say the sentence. I want to do more Kant after I do 2 hours of Spinoza, and that's a good idea." It's like, I don't know everyone, that just sounds like too much. Like, just as that is, that's just too much right there. Ugh, awful. 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 Now I've completely lost my fucking place. God damn it, Reed. This might actually be a good breaking point, because that's 2 solid hours, and it can be a lot. This next paragraph is a lot. Yeah, this next one's too much. We're not going to do it today. This next one is literally going to be like an hour. The next 2 paragraphs are next week's reading. The next 2 paragraphs are next week's reading all the way through. So with that, I will say, hey there. Thank all of you for joining us on this lovely reading. I'll be doing random streaming this weekend, I'm hoping. We'll see as we get going. If you want to join us live, you're more than welcome to. Every day we've got some fucking reading or another run by somebody who is in over their head, but also wonderful and doing some great shit. And August.
Yeah, come join Spinoza tomorrow.
Great. And then also join our Nietzsche readings. Let me see. What do we have here? Twilight of the Idols is supposed to start a few hours ago. August. Tomorrow, Spinoza, noon. And then we have our Rouillé reading at 4 a.m. Europeans. What can I do? And then
I did cook this morning for some people. So
and then Ben has been running cinema on Sundays, nice and early. And then we have Shakespeare doing Drug Cartels Do Not Exist, which is a phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, it's a good reading group. And then Mondays, Gay Science, Anti-Oedipus. And then that continues. Dear Lord, we have so many fucking things going on. And on top of it, every Tuesday and every Thursday, I've got my readings. So if you want to join us live, you're more than welcome to discord.gg/DGQC. We are here to help you understand these things. And also, we're open to being yelled at. It's fine. I'm used to it. If you want to support what we do, of course, memberships, YouTube shit, all that stuff's great. The best thing you can do is head over to patreon.com/DGQC and drop $5 a month. Anything that can make this a more predictable income allows me to do this much more often. And I think with that, that is going to be it for me today. I will just say thank all of you, and I'll see you all. Wait, who can I send you to? Is anyone live right now? Is there anyone I can send you to right now? It doesn't look like it. Does anyone have someone they want me to send you to right now? Anyone? I'm open. There is nothing good happening. Wait, is it a film watching thing? No. Cinema is two Deleuze books, The Time Image and The Movement Image. And they're fantastic, to be frank. They're fantastic. No one's live right now, so nope, you get nobody. So with that, I'll send you on your way. Say, I will see you all soon enough. All right, we should be clear, I think.